right. Well, good evening, and thank you all so much for coming to our program, The Loss of the Edmund Fitzgerald with Steven Mrozek. Tonight's program is a webinar format, so your cameras and your mics are off, but you're welcome to use the chat or the Q&A features to ask questions. We'll wait to the very end to answer questions, but feel free to submit your questions anytime throughout the program. Yesterday was the 45th anniversary of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald, so we're very pleased to have our presenter with us tonight to talk about that, author and historian Steven Mrozek. Steven has recently retired from a 26-year career in the Army. We just learned that he knows my uncle Steven, and he was my uncle's mentor. I sent that message over to him tonight, and he sent a message back saying that Steven is an outstanding soldier and a great guy. So we have that endorsement already. Steven has extensively researched both military history and Great Lakes history. He was formerly a curator at the Dossin Great Lakes Museum on Belle Isle and is also an experienced shipwreck diver who has explored our history under the water. Welcome, Steven, and I'll turn the screen over to you.
Great. Well, thanks, Phil. Thanks for the introduction. And good evening, everybody. And to those veterans out there, I hope you had a very happy Veterans Day today. And as Phil noted, yesterday, was the 45th anniversary of the loss of the Edmund Fitzgerald. There's been over 6,000 wrecks on the Great Lakes, but there's probably only one that most people are knowledgeable about, and that is the loss of the Fitz. Well, I assume all of you here are from the Great Lakes state of Michigan, so let me give you a bird's eye view of the region. And we're concerned with the largest body of fresh water in the world. And there's 22% of all the fresh water is right here in the Great Lakes, and we're surrounded by water on three sides. And I don't have to give you a geography lesson or geology lesson on how the Great Lakes were formed. We all know that was through glacial activity approximately 12,000 years ago. But we were blessed with five Great Lakes, five major lakes that provide us with all the freshwater resources that we need. And we're more concerned with the most northern part of the Great Lakes. That is the largest, and that's Lake Superior. And Lake Superior itself is the deepest part, right about in the center, is 1,332 feet. And it's that I've always been taught it looks like a wolf's head. And the eye of the wolf is Isle Royale. The nose is over near Duluth. And the mouth is the Keweenaw Peninsula. And if you squint a little bit, maybe it sort of looks like a wolf. But the lake itself is extensive and very precarious. At particularly this time of year, we're right in the middle of the storm season right now. It's an annual event. It happens every year, and it all depends on how we deal with it. The geography of the lake, as I pointed out, what we're concerned with is the nose, or the most westerly point of Lake Superior is known as Duluth, and that is primarily one of two locations where freighters go to pick up their taconite pellets, their load of iron ore. And the other one is up the coast a little bit, a place called Two Harbors. And those are going to play very pertinent to our conversation today. And Isle Royale, of course, is right in the middle. It's that green spot in the middle of the lakes. And then also way over on the eastern end, you see there's a large island called Michigaten Island. And just south of that, you'll see another little dot. and that's going to play into it also. That's an island called Caribou Island. And it's not so much Caribou Island that we're concerned about. It's there's a shoals area, just a shallow area just north of that called Fathom Shoals. And then down to the southeast, there's another area there that's known as Whitefish Bay. And there's a little dot there, and that's called La Parisian Island. And through the course of events today, there's going to be a freighter anchored 2 miles to the west of that called the William Clay Ford. That was a Ford boat that was 647 feet at that particular time. The water from there flows down into Sault Ste. Marie and the Soo Locks. And then from there, the boats can leave and depart, head out into the North Channel to Lake Huron. So just want to get you oriented so that you know what's going on. This is the lake where we're concerned about here. More importantly, at this particular point, we're going to talk a lot about a boat called the Edmund Fitzgerald. This boat was built at Great Lakes Engineering Works, located in River Rouge, not too far from Detroit, just downriver area. And Great Lakes Engineering Works was perhaps one of the most substantial shipbuilding firms in the area. Particular of interest, and that's why I selected this picture here, is you can see the huge cargo bays where the taconite was loaded into. And the Fitzgerald was the first ship to be built using modular systems. They had prefabricated elements or sections that they just assembled these blocks. And as I mentioned this to people in the past, they asked if this was somehow related to the loss of the ship. And at this particular point, no, it is not. It's a process that's used extensively in current times, but there's no evidence that this played any part into the loss of the boat. But this is the boat being hard at work. This is in 1957, November 29th, 1957. And up in the corner of this picture, the upper left-hand corner, it says hull number 301. That is the number, the Great Lakes Engineering firm company number. And it wasn't known as the Fitzgerald at this point. That's the hull number. That's what they remember the boat as. The better part of the hull was completed and was launched on June 6th, 1958. And here you see a large crowd present and ready for the dropping of the boat itself. Across the back, which is kind of hard to see in this particular photograph, it says Edmund Fitzgerald and it says Milwaukee. Well, Detroit's a long way from Milwaukee, and I've had maybe only a couple people. I haven't had too many people actually ask me, who is Edmund Fitzgerald? Well, the Fitzgerald was built as a investment by a Milwaukee-based life insurance company, and having nothing to do with the trade, with the sailing on the Great Lakes. But they had this ship built, and it was contracted off or leased by a shipbuilding company. And Edmund Fitzgerald was the president of that Milwaukee insurance company. There you go. And when it was built and launched in 1958, the Fitzgerald was the largest ship on the Great Lakes at that point, 729 feet long. The boat itself had 21 hatch covers, as you can see over here. And towards your left, there's a little white structure between hatch cover number 19 and 20. And that is called a hatch cover crane. That would rail all the way across the spar deck on the Fitzgerald, as it does on all ships. And that's how they take the hatch covers off when they're about to load. And The boat is carrying the colors of the Columbia Transportation Company. And there you can see the yellow band on the stack with a C for Columbia, and is based out of Cleveland. So a double use for that letter C. The lifeboats are just below that, below the stack, and there's one on either side. They're about roughly 35 feet long. And they're also on the bow section, forward section of the ship. There is you can see where the pilot house is on the front, and behind that would be a life raft, because just in case you weren't able to get from the front to the back to the lifeboat, you had another alternative source of abandoning the ship. Pointing out the front of the ship is what's called a aiming spar. This is was used in steering the ship left or right. It has no other purpose other than that. It's a point of which you can determine how far you're going to the left or to the right. And we're gonna go off. There's a picture of the Fitzgerald going through the St. Mary's River after clearing the Sioux Locks on a earlier trip. And on the radar mast up on front, there's two flags flying there, one to the left and one to the right. The one to the right is approximately 4 feet long, and it's the ship burgee that says Edmund Fitzgerald on it. And the one over to the left is the pennant that has the company name, the Columbia Transportation. It's white with two dark blue bands on it, and in the middle is the red star with a yellow C for Columbia. Here you can see that aiming spar really clearly, and it also gives you a good view of the pilot house, which is going to play into this a little bit later on. The anchors, the one over on your right is the port side, and the right side, the starboard side anchor over on, but in this case would be on your left. That anchor was launched in the Detroit River in January of 1974, and we'll talk more about that later on. Being low in the water, I can tell easily that the ship is carrying a full load of taconite pellets. Well, as I mentioned and alluded to, we're in the middle of the storm season, and at this time of year, we have cold air masses coming from the north, coming down out of Canada and hitting the lakes, and usually have warm weather, which we experienced last week. And a lot of that warm air masses starts coming up to from the south, and it creates very unstable atmospheric conditions over the Great Lakes. Excuse me. And this particular chart shows the path of the ship going from Duluth and then heading toward Whitefish Bay. The Fitzgerald, here you have the keel was laid in August 7th, 57 at Great Lakes Engineering Works. Although we all know it was 729 feet long, it was 75 feet wide, which was standard for lake boats of that size. And it had a carrying capacity of 31,000 tons. That's what it was rated for. And of course, the Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company was the owner. Early in the morning of November 10th, 1975, it was quite a sunny day. It was very pleasant, no stormy weather. But captains of two particular boats were looking at their charts weather reports, and they could see that the conditions were developing to producing a pretty good-sized storm later on during that day and evening over the better part of Lake Superior. So it was at this point that the Captain Bernie Cooper of the Arthur B. Anderson, which was up in Two Harbors, that's that black line over there, was loaded up and was ready to head out. And he had been in conversation with Captain McSorley, who was the master of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And they both agreed that they would be sailing a little further to the north, because the winds were going to be coming out of the northwest and northwest to the southeast, and there you'd have winds later on that would be generating winds with a velocity of between 60 and 65 miles an hour, with gusts heading towards 75 miles an hour. So the further you are to the north or closer to the Canadian shore, the better off you're going to be. And then when you get up to the north eastern section of the lake, it's a downward run straight down through into Whitefish Bay. In between those two islands I pointed out earlier, that green mass there is Michigan Island, and a little further to the south would be Caribou Island. The Arthur Anderson was actually about 40 feet bigger than the Fitzgerald on this particular night. Although the Fitz was the largest when it was built, in the 1970s, it was pretty typical to have lake boats extended. Meaning they just went into dry dock, they opened it up in the middle at some point, pulled the two pieces apart and added 120 feet. Usually it was 120 feet in the middle of it. And that's what they did to the Anderson. She was a straight deck freighter at that time, as much as you see here, and 767 feet long. So almost 40 feet bigger. The best that the Anderson can make fully loaded was about 14 and a half knots. And the best that the Fitzgerald can do was 16 knots. So the Fitz was quite a bit, a little bit faster. And throughout that night would actually be pulling away from the Anderson. The wind began to intensify right about Isle Royale. Actually, and then the waves started to get a little rough. And the Fitz was outdistancing the Anderson, as I mentioned. And when they were up in the northeast corner of Lake Superior, the storm knocked out the radar of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Waves were between 20 and 30 feet high, and you have absolutely no peripheral vision. You can't see anything around you, can't see the horizon. You're just working off of a compass bearing. And this is a very difficult situation for the Fitz. Captain McSorley got onto the radio and contacted Cooper on the Anderson and asked for assistance, which of course Cooper was very happy to oblige. And this meant that the Fitzgerald had to slow down and drift and let the Anderson get a little bit closer, a lot closer. When the range on the radar is about 10 miles. So the game plan was for the Fitzgerald to slow down long enough or far enough so they would end up on the radar screen of the Arthur Anderson. And at that particular time, they would be able to communicate with the Fitzgerald and give them information regarding their the heading that they would have to take in order to navigate from the northeast corner of Lake Superior all the way down to Whitefish Bay, and be able to get the radar repaired. And there's two radar units on the Fitzgerald, and both of them happened to be knocked out at the same time. Here you can see what's called green water. This is when the actual waves go over the ship. You're not splashing it with a spray or anything. It's just the waves are just going right over the deck of the ship. And she's having a rough time running through the seas. Now, both Captain Cooper and also Captain McSorley, they've gone through this sort of thing before. They're very experienced mariners, and they knew what they were getting into, and they knew it wasn't going to be easy. But they've done this before, and it's one of those things that's going to keep you on the edge of your seat all night, but it can be done. So there was some concern, but they didn't. No need to think that it was going to be anything other than routine. Fitzgerald, I'll preface everything right now with saying that no one knows exactly why the Fitzgerald sank. But I will tell you about the leading theory of why the Fitzgerald believed to be why the Fitzgerald didn't make it that night. I alluded to those two islands over on the eastern side of the lake. Michigan is very large, but that one small one, Caribou Island, and that area just north of it called Fathom Shoals. What's believed to be and accepted as the cause for the demise of the Fitzgerald was that 6 Fathom Shoals area is actually not 36 feet. It's listed on a lot of the charts as 23 feet. And you can still see it today on any chart. In particular, if you have swells that are in the vicinity of 20, 30 feet high, that's the waves are 20, 30 feet high, but the swells are going to bring that down. So even shallower, probably closer to 18 to 20 feet. And it makes it very, very precarious, particularly when the Fitzgerald fully loaded was going to draw about 25 feet of water. The Fitzgerald was drifting a little bit closer to out of the projected route and was getting a little bit closer to Caribou Island and in the vicinity of the shoals. And it was noted that the captain of the Anderson, Bernie Cooper, actually said on the radio, "That's a lot closer than I'd want to be," noting that he was watching the Fitzgerald get a little bit close to that area. And I'm not sure if they had any conversation regarding advising the Fitzgerald of their location, but the Fitz got a lot closer to it and very well could have hit those shoals and damaged the hull, particularly in the forward section, and was taking on water. As the Fitzgerald extended beyond that and started getting a little bit closer to Whitefish Bay, there was a saltwater ship that was leaving. I believe it was a Swedish ship that was leaving Whitefish Bay. And of course, it had an American pilot on board, someone familiar with the Great Lakes. And that particular pilot was conversing with Captain McSorley, trying to find out more about the conditions that he was about to enter. In the course of that conversation, McSorley mentioned that he had a bad list to starboard, which incidentally, that probably would have been the starboard side that was close to the shoals and may have been damaged. He mentioned also that he had both pumps going, and from what I understand, there is 2 pump systems that are on the boat, a total of like 6 to 8 pumps that are capable of pumping upwards of 800 gallons of water a minute. In spite of all that, he had that bad list. But the very last thing we ever hear from broadcast from the Fitzgerald is that he had they were holding their own. And this is a statement which doesn't seem to project any concern or any possible knowledge of any danger. Just felt that it's a rough go, but they're not too far from Whitefish Bay and very welcome. Looking forward to making it there. Well, it's believed that the theory goes on to say that the bow section of the Fitzgerald was getting heavier as water was leaking in, and the waves, when you roll through a wave 20, 30 feet high, the bow section is going to dip down further and further into the water and coming back up. And it still has enough buoyancy to poke through the surface and keep pushing forward. There is as the water gets onto into the ship, the bow gets deeper and deeper into the water. And it's believed that it went in and lost buoyancy, and the bow section extended down below the water line. And then the bow section would be heavier than the stern section. And right in the middle is that stress point that eventually gave way and broke up. The ship did break in two, but it was underwater at the time. It wasn't, the waves didn't pick it up, and it didn't break in on the surface of the lake. It broke up when it was underwater. There's a lot of concern at this point. There is no chance or opportunity of sending out a distress call. No one was actually, at this particular point, focusing on anything other than the fact that they are now underwater. The ship is breaking up underwater, and the crew, most of your crew is going to be in the stern section, and that's where the crew's quarter is, the engine room, everything else. Up forward would be the captain's quarters, his office. You had the mates, the first, second, third mate were the ship's officers, and they had their quarters up forward. That's where the radio room is also, and so everything is right there and is now underwater. The ship's breaking up. The bow section was approximately 276 feet long. That drifted down and hit the bottom. The bottom of the lake at that section is a lot of bedrock with some sediment over that. The bow section went straight down. It hit really hard. They estimate, based on the damage, I heard estimates of that it hit at about 30 miles an hour. Approximately 200 feet of the center section of the ship just broke up and disintegrated into small pieces, there's a large debris field down there. And the stern section proceeded and followed the rest of the ship down toward the bottom. The screw was turning, and so the torque from that caused it to rotate and settle to the bottom, totally inverted. The two pieces are at the bottom that are about 170 feet apart, pretty much as you see now. In this particular illustration, you can see that the bow section is severely damaged from the collision. You had, in the process of breaking up, you have a lot of the hatch covers are blown off. Each one of those hatch covers, as I mentioned, there's 21 of them. There's 64 hatch cover clamps covering each one of them. And then as it was going down, a lot of the air pressure is enough to blow off some of the hatch covers, and also the collision at the bottom was enough to jar loose a lot of the hatch cover clamps. So the bow section settled at the bottom. It's in 529 feet of water. And to the rear of the top part of this illustration, you can see the totally inverted stern section of the Fitzgerald. The temperature down there is approximately 34 to 36 degrees Fahrenheit. Not quite freezing, but it's really cold. And it's no ambient light whatsoever at that, so it's just pitch black. And so it's shrouded in darkness and in a very chilly water temperature. And as she was sinking, you may have heard about the two lifeboats that were found later on. As the boats, they had a cover, a canvas cover on each of the lifeboats, and to protect the life support equipment that was inside each one. And as the boat began to settle down, the air trapped in them caused them to rip off the davits and come to the surface and floating upside down. And this is boat number 2, which would have been on the port side, boat number 1 on the starboard side. And they're capable of, the bow you can see, they're capable of carrying 50 persons. So either boat would have been capable of carrying the entire crew if they would have been able to get to it. But that we know it wasn't the case. Both lifeboats were badly damaged. One of them is located at the Great Lakes Shipwrecks Museum in Whitefish Point. And the other one is on the Valley Camp. That's a ship museum that's located in Sault Ste. Marie at the Soo Locks. There have been a total of 9 expeditions on the wreck to survey the wreck and try to determine the cause. The boat went down November 10th, 1975, but it wasn't until May of 1976 that a naval vessel entered the Great Lakes with a tethered camera on board. And this camera was a unmanned vehicle that was lowered down. They used sonar to vector the UV into the proper location. And it actually came in on the opposite side of this drawing. It came in over on the port side. And from there, you were able to see the names Edmund and Fitzgerald on it as they came in. The camera on that first mission on the expedition on the wreck itself, from there went up and straight into the pilot house. And here you can see the first view of the Edmund Fitzgerald. You see MUND and FIT, and you can see this would be on the port side bow of the ship. And you can see right from here, there's a lot of damage to the ship itself. And some of the portholes located on the forward section of the ship, the bow section of the ship. This particular photograph here to me, is one of the most chilling that I've seen. You can see the forward section of the pilot house hit so hard that steel framework around the pilot house just bent, caved in. And outside, there's a little compass that was outside the pilot house of the ship. And all the glass, all the windows of the entire pilot house were blown in. A lot of it had to do with the speed and the pressure as it was sinking and heading toward the bottom. And there's absolutely no one in that pilot house. No bodies were ever recovered. And in this particular photograph, you see some straps hanging at the top of the picture. And these are from a life jacket. So someone in that pilot house went for a life jacket, but did not have time to put it on. So that life jacket is floating on the ceiling of the pilot house with those straps hanging down through one of the windows in the forward section of the ship. So you're looking at the front of the ship, looking into it. And remarkable photograph. This is on a photograph of the side of the ship over on the starboard side. And you can see the Edmund Fitzgerald and a lot of the debris that's randomly floats around and circulates in the water at that depth. This is one of the largest pieces of the Fitzgerald above water. This is the starboard bow anchor of the ship. And this takes some explanation. Note that this was not recovered from the wreckage of the ship in Lake Superior. In January 1974, the Fitzgerald was headed down on the Great Lakes and entered the Detroit River and had passed Belle Isle. and was waiting for its turn to go and unload its cargo, and came down. And there's an area about a mile west of the island of Belle Isle. There's an anchorage there. And so the Fitzgerald came about heading into the current, because the current is going, in this picture, is going from your left to right. And so the Fitzgerald had to come about using its thruster, had a bow thruster, and turn forward into that current, into that area, the anchorage area. And when it's situated, the command would be given to drop both anchors, the port and starboard bow anchors. And it was at this particular point that they discovered that the starboard bow anchor unhooked. And this is the anchor that unhooked. And a question is often asked, how do you lose an anchor? Well, there's a large letter C that's approximately 2 feet to 2.5 feet, is drop forged steel, and it looks like a giant letter C. And that master link hooks around the shackle, which you can see on the top center of this anchor. And then the other end of it hooks very nicely around the end link of the anchor chain. Piece fits in there, and a non-load bearing bolt holds it all together. And that's how you attach an anchor to an anchor chain. Well, something happened to that bolt, and the locking element for that master link fell away. But this particular anchor here is marked, and it weighs 12,290 pounds. And it's also marked that it was manufactured in July of 1957. So that tells us a lot about the anchor. So there's enough that it's a 6-ton anchor, and there's enough tension on with 6 tons to hold that anchor chain and that master link together, so that nothing is going to happen to it. But when you put it on the bottom of the Detroit River at that point, you release that tension, and so that it just unhooked. The anchor is now at about 30 feet in the bottom of the Detroit River in the anchorage area there. And the story goes, Captain McSorley instantly knew that he was minus an anchor, contacted a commercial diver that would come about and just kind of reattach the anchor to the anchor chain. Well, I'll remind you that this is in January, and in the Detroit River, there's a lot of ice floating around. And when the diver entered the water, was soon surrounded by ice masses that were flowing down. And for approximately 15 minutes, he was trapped underneath his dive boat, unable to do anything. And when he had a chance to break, he came to the surface, reboarded the dive boat, and promptly said, "I'm not doing this. It's a little bit too dangerous for me." So at this particular point, McSorley just acknowledged the fact that he had somehow lost his anchor and was minus an anchor. And he notified the company, Columbia Transportation Company, that he lost an anchor through no fault of anyone's, but need another one. So the company prepared to have that anchor, to get an anchor, and that would be waiting for him at some later date over in Cleveland. So the Fitzgerald was there, was stationary for a while, and they were able to stay in place using the port side bow anchor and the stern anchor. Later on, they would continue down the river once daybreak broke, and it was easier traveling down the river during the daylight, and continue the route. It was headed toward Cleveland at that particular point. At this phase, the Fitzgerald was not as famous as it is now. It didn't sink yet. And it was just another lake boat, and it just lost an anchor, and that was no big deal. It was a big deal, but it didn't raise any red flags and didn't raise a lot of curious inquiries. That would happen about 18 years after the Fitzgerald was lost. Someone came across a little sidebar note of the Fitzgerald losing an anchor. Excuse me. And that prompted some follow-up research. There was a latitude and longitude given to the company for the loss, where the anchor was lost at. It turns out it wasn't there. I have to remind people the anchor is 6 tons, so the current's not going to do anything to move it. So I suspect that the latitude and longitude was just incorrectly reported. Trying to locate the anchor was of interest. They used a magnetometer. This is a device that's dragged behind a boat back and forth over a pattern, and trying to locate large metallic objects like anchors. And it's amazing what turned up. A lot of other large metallic objects like drain pipes and what have you also showed up. And once these points were marked and saved, they were later on, a lot of diving took place, and investigating each one of those hits, as we call them. And until we came across something that was turned out to be the anchor from the Edmund Fitzgerald. We were able to locate and raise money to be able to raise this anchor. And it was brought to the surface in 1992. Also, that's popularly known as that the ship's bell on the top of the pilot house was going to be recovered. And what they were going to do, this was something that was designed to help bring closure to the families of the 29 missing crew members, and having a tangible object that is part of the ship itself, and something that that they can see and they can touch, and to help them come to terms with the loss of their loved ones. The replacement bell was a replica of this particular bell, and the exception was that it had the added names and positions of the crew members that were on board the ship at the time when it went down. And that bell was placed on a stanchion, and the bells were switched. They used underwater cutting torches that were able to separate the existing stanchion and be able to bring the bell to the surface. Well, it's very deep, and it's beyond the reasonable depth for scuba divers, even the technical diving. There was a mechanical suit called a newt suit that allowed a diver to be able lowered down onto the wreck itself, and he was able to, there's devices on it allowing him to maneuver and get in the right position. Being very dark, it also had built-in lights on it so he can see what he's doing. And with cutting equipment, he was able to cut the bell stanchion. He'd secure it first with a lowering line that was wrapped around the stanchion and the bell securely. And once it was broke free, then it was brought to the surface. And this is the bell as in the condition it was when they brought it to the surface. The replacement bell was then lowered down and was placed in the same location. And it was built on a platform that just sat right there on top of the pilot house. And they secured it so that it wouldn't, no chance of that bell falling off or somehow moving from its location. And the boat itself, the Fitzgerald, is in Canadian waters. And it was coming down, it was in just north of the international boundary. and went down in Canadian waters, so that any investigation or exploration of the wreck itself would require permission from the Canadian government. And it was at this particular point, when they switched the bells, that it was at the request of the family, there are no more applications will be considered for exploration of the wreck of the Fitzgerald. That it's down, there's nothing else they can learn from the wreck itself. Anything that would shed any light as to the nature of the boat sinking, and it's therefore considered a grave and is not to be disturbed. All crew members that went down with the ship, beginning with Captain McSorley, no remains have ever been located and brought to the surface. I see where someone claimed to have photographed physical remains, and those have all have been totally unsubstantiated and have not been proven. And most people consider those photographs to be non-genuine at all, but fabricated. But before you here, you see the names of all 29 crew members, and they're all set on the bottom. Most of them are trapped in the stern section. I may add at this time that the Fitzgerald is the largest ship and the last ship to sink in the Great Lakes. We haven't lost a ship since the Fitzgerald, and that means 45 years we haven't lost any ships. There have been crew members that have fallen overboard or something of that nature, so there has been loss of life, but we have not lost a ship in the Great Lakes since 1975. And that brings everything to a conclusion. I'd like to open it up so that if there are any questions, I'd certainly like to try to answer those for you.
Great, thank you. We've got two already. The first question is, you had referenced a replacement bell. Was that replacement bell just for a monument until they had the real one? Why was there a replacement bell?
Well, the replacement bell was the whole plan. This was in conjunction with the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum up at Whitefish Point, which is a focal point for the story of the loss of the Fitzgerald. And they pioneered this whole process with a lot of input from all the families of the crew members. And this was in essence, to bring closure to the loss of their loved ones. And so this replacement bell was a replica of the original bell. And this was known because there's a standard size of bell for that boat. That information was already known. So they had this other bell manufactured, and the replacement meant that it was identical, except that it had the names of the entire crew on board. And that would be like a monument that would be placed on top of the pilot house. So that
can be seen, the one that they uncovered can be seen at the Shipwreck Museum then at Whitefish Bay?
That's correct, yeah. One thing, I don't know. I think that it would have been better if they would have left it in the original condition as I showed it, tarnished and with a patina on it. But they polished it up so it's nice and shiny. And somehow I think, I don't know, it's just, maybe it's different people look at it different ways. I thought it would have a greater impact if they left it the way they recovered it. But
yeah,
it's shiny right now.
You may have answered this next one right after the question was posed. Someone asks if they recovered any of the bodies. I think you said they have not.
No bodies have ever been recovered off of that. They're one of the things that Gordon Lightfoot hints around in his song is that the lake never gives up her dead. And the reason for that is anyone who's gone up to Lake Superior and tried to go swimming in July or August, they'll know that it's really, really cold and it really never warms up. Well, that creates the conditions in which the bodies don't come to the surface. It's like a refrigerator, and the bodies don't come to the surface. They don't deteriorate or decompose and rise to the surface. So everything is right there, and so anything would settle to the bottom. So
Now, someone asks, what depth is the Fitzgerald at right now?
the Fitzgerald, the wreck settles at 529 feet, roughly 530 feet under the surface.
All right. Oh, I'm going to scroll down. I think there may have been some more coming through. So someone asks about theories about what happened to the bodies of the crew. Why would they not have seen bodies in the pilot house? Oh, I guess after the glass blew out, I guess perhaps that's why. But do you know why they weren't able to see any of the bodies when they did the underwater excavations?
Any of the explorations, I believe on a couple of them, they were looking around the surrounding area there, and nothing was seen, nothing was discovered. The boat, as it was coming in, the windows imploded. It's theorized. I heard someone mention that they probably ended up being forced out the back windows as the pilot house was coming in, as the section was coming down rather rapidly and at the depth when all the windows imploded. It would have forced anything right out the back window. So that was a theory that I heard.
Okay, thank you. What changes have occurred since 1975 that's helped prevent any shipwrecks since then?
Well, one of the, I think it's interesting to note and important to note that whether you accept this theory or any other theory, that it was a series of unfortunate sets of circumstances. It was nothing. I mean, the radar happened to get knocked out by the storm, and the Fitzgerald wandered a little bit too close. There's a lot of redundant systems on these ships. There just isn't one radar unit. There's multiple, like two usually. And it's like there's two navigational systems, two compasses. There's redundance of everything, because it's Murphy's Law. Something can go wrong at will, and then you need a backup system. And that can be seen over at the Dossin Great Lakes Museum. There were two ships that went out into the storm at the request of the Coast Guard to look for any possible survivors that may have been able to abandon ship. And the waters being very cold, it was very important to get to them rapidly. Your life expectancy floating in Lake Superior at that time is approximately 15 minutes, not very long. So if someone would have gotten off and would have been in a raft or something out there wearing an exposure suit or somehow out there, it was very important to be able to get to them. So two ships went out into Lake Superior at that wreck site at the last known location of the Fitzgerald. And that is of course, the Anderson came about and headed back out there, and also the William Clay Ford, which I pointed out was at anchor 2 miles west of La Parisian Island. That boat got underway at the request of the Coast Guard. It was a brief conference in the pilot house with Captain Don Erickson and several of the crew, the ship's officers, and a couple of the crew. And he opened it up and asked, well, what do you guys think? And they told him that, you will do what you want us to do. This is a situation that needed to be addressed. I'll note right here that the William Clay Ford was in ballast, meaning that it was empty, and it was in the morning was going to head out toward Duluth, giving the storm a chance to blow itself out. But at this particular stage of the game, what was very important for the Fitzgerald and also for the William Clay Ford was that they were going to leave early. Erickson, being the master of the boat, he's responsible for the ship and the crew. That's a tremendous amount of responsibility that any one of these ship's officers, even today, accepts. So that he thought it prudent at this particular point to pull up their anchors and head out of Whitefish Bay and actually head north. The Fitzgerald sank 17 miles northeast of Whitefish Point and 12 miles west of Coppermine Point. So that was the last location of the Fitzgerald. One thing I forgot to mention is that when the Anderson was watching the Fitzgerald on their radar, there was a brief snow squall, approximately 15 minutes long duration, that extended from the southwest to the northeast, that direction. And what that did is it created a clutter on the radar of the Arthur Anderson. And so for approximately 15 minutes, they couldn't see the Fitzgerald because of this clutter from that snowstorm that was reaching across Lake Superior. The last known position that they saw the Fitzgerald in was that's where they eventually found the ship, and they knew where it was. So they marked it on the radar screen. And that is, there was a brief conversation afterwards between the Captain Cooper on the Anderson, Captain Erickson on the William Clay Ford, and the commander of the Coast Guard station there in Sault Ste. Marie. And the only search and rescue assets the Coast Guard had at that time was in Duluth, Minnesota, on the other side of the lake, and that's where the wood rush was. And there was an immediate emergency recall of the crew. They were all not on the ship, and they were able to get underway in approximately a half hour after that recall. They got under, even in good weather, it would take approximately 12 hours to get from Duluth to the location where the Fitzgerald was lost, which wasn't going to be an asset in this particular situation. So the two boats, the two freighters, the Arthur Anderson and the William Clay Ford, got underway and headed out into that area, and they came pretty close. They were approximately a mile distant and traveled through that area. Crew members from the William Clay Ford that I've talked with indicated that they did see debris in the water, but there was no indication or no sign of any of the crew members in the water or in the area. There was a Coast Guard helicopter that was launched from Traverse City, came over, and because they had a rescue swimmer on board, but with waves at 20, 30 feet high, you could not deploy that rescue swimmer because you'd never be able to recover him again. So instead, they dropped illumination flares and lit up the whole area as the ships passed through there, increasing the chances of seeing someone as they came through by illuminating the area. It was approximately 7:15 in the evening when the Fitzgerald sank. So by the time these ships got in that area there, it was getting dark. It was quite dark. The illumination flares were required. That was a big help, but there was no indication that any crew members were able to get off the ship. So the William Clay Ford, that's the pilot house of the ship at Dossin Great Lakes Museum, which you can see every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 10 to 5 p.m. If you visit the Dossin Museum, and you can actually go up into that pilot house. Down below, we talk a little bit more in greater detail about the loss of the Fitzgerald. And I think that answered your question.
Thank you. I have a question. Did they find any wreckage on top of the water, such as other life preservers? I know you said that the lifeboats came up to the surface. Anything else discovered?
There was some life rings that, because those aren't secured to anything. They're designed so you can grab them and throw them if you need it, if someone went overboard. There was some wood fragments that were found floating on the water. Throughout the the next couple of months, they were able to locate life rings that have floated up and drifted off somewhere. They were all recovered, or many of them were recovered. There was an oil slick, which is never a good sign. If you see an oil slick, that knows that, the boat did break up. And but there was no other indication that no other debris that was evident.
Thank you. This next question is less about the ship and more about the song. Do you know how Gordon Lightfoot got interested in the wreck?
Well, one of the things I know, he's a resident of Canada, and both Canada and the United States in the region, the Great Lakes region, there's an attraction of the lake boats that are specifically designed to sail in the Great Lakes. There's a difference between saltwater and freshwater, and the Great Lakes are often referred to as the inland seas. These are it takes more, the curvature of the earth, it takes 7 miles before you begin to lose the horizon on the opposite side. It has to do with the curvature of the earth. And so these massive amounts of fresh water here they attract a lot of interest both in the U.S. and Canada. And for a boat the size of the Fitzgerald to be lost in a storm, and with the loss of the entire crew, was something that captured the attention of everyone in the area, and even on national news in different parts of the country. People heard about this ship that sank, and this also, that's what captured the interest of Gordon Lightfoot. He talks about the Musty Old church in Detroit, the Mariners Church, and that is still there. But because of the way Detroit grew up, you really have to look for it. It's on Jefferson Avenue, and it's pretty close to the entrance, the tunnel entrance, the Windsor Detroit tunnel. So right in that area there, you have to look for it, but you can find it there. So that's, all these things play into it, and it's really remarkable. It's it's a very haunting melody, as you can tell when you played it. Was something that, and it's a remarkable song.
Well, thank you. I have a couple of people saying he read about it in Newsweek magazine. I'll have to skip around because we don't have time for everyone's question, but this one caught my eye. And it's from my parents. My parents are watching tonight. One legend is about three rogue giant waves. One legend is about three rogue giant waves that could have caused the hull to fracture in the middle. Has this theory been dispelled?
Well, there was from the crew of the captain of the Arthur Anderson. He tells a story where, of course, at this particular stage, as they're heading south, actually they're heading southeast across the lake. The Anderson would be approximately 10 miles behind the Edmund Fitzgerald. And he made mention of the fact that he got hit by three waves in rapid succession. And the waves were right up right where his lifeboats were. So they were really high up on the ship. And one of the theories was that these waves came and hit the boat and pushed the bow down, and but we just don't know. It hasn't been dispelled. It's just there's no way to actually prove exactly what happened. Whether those in fact were the waves that continued on further to the south and finished off, brought an end to the crippled Fitzgerald.
All right. Thank you so much. I've got one more question from Steven, my uncle. I promise I'm not purposely choosing my family's questions. I see the questions and then I decide to answer them, and then I check the name. And this is from Steven, so you know him. He asks, what is your personal interest in the Fitzgerald that led you to research its history?
Well, interesting question. I was the assistant curator at the Dossin Great Lakes Museum back in the 90s. And I've always been intrigued by a lot of mysteries. And, you know, the Great Lakes is full of mysteries. And I learned that there's over 6,000 ships sloshed in the Great Lakes, and an estimated 30,000 crew members, mariners that were lost through mishaps, through acts of God, as you know, storms, or through human error on the lakes itself. So there's a lot of mysteries, and you know, shipwrecks are always something that attracts people's attention, and that prompted me to become a diver and to be able to explore some of the shipwrecks. Some are diveable. You can go onto them. There's a lot of them you can visit. You learn more about the storms and the conditions and that existed, that created, that allowed these ships or forced these ships to go below the water line. And it's something I feel as a very privileged and honored to be able to go onto these wrecks themselves and to be able to see boats that have the crew did everything they can in most cases to save the boat, and it don't always works out. And but I think as far as the Fitzgerald goes, it's the most requested and most discussed and mentioned shipwreck on the Great Lakes. I think it's because it's in recent memory, and it's just Gordon Lightfoot's song didn't hurt that either. You know, that reputation. It kind of, people began thinking about it, remembering it, and I don't know how many times it's been played on November 10th, but it's something that just people, when they hear that tune, that melody, it just, the people connect with it. So I'm very happy to be able to talk to people about the Fitzgerald, and try to answer their questions, and trying to bring some understand the mystery of the loss of the ship. Since there were no survivors, we have no firsthand accounts for how the ship went down. So it's one where you have to explore the wreck. You try to piece together bits of information, all that forensic investigation stuff that we've all heard about on the TV shows. You know, it all plays into here. It's all archaeology, looking at the facts, the evidence, and trying to piece together a probable cause. But it's something that we'll never be able to confirm.
Great. Thank you so much, Steven. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I don't have time for further questions, but thank you all so much for attending tonight and for participating. And thank you, Steven, for sharing your expertise with us.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. Very happy to be able to talk about and share what I know about the Fitzgerald. And it's 45 years ago. You know, it's a long time. But as I pointed out, trying to put a positive spin on everything. We haven't lost a ship in 45 years, so something's going right for us now.
I'm knocking on wood every time you say that. All right. Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and thank you all very much for coming.